Okay, good. Thank you. So we're looking at action items. This is a letter of support for the Southern UGA Code Amendment sent to the County Council. So, Mr. Baumann, are you going to lead the discussion here?
Yes, I am.
Page 47.
Thank you. The purpose of this agenda item is to review and approve a letter of support regarding potential changes in development regulations for a portion of the city's southern urban growth area. The concept of these proposed changes is for development regulations as currently understood by staff that would affect only the parcels previously used as the Seattle Snohomish Mill. The City Council has directed staff to present a letter of support for its review, and that is on attachment A in your packet, which is on page 49. As the Council is aware, Sean Sullivan, who I believe is here this evening as a representative of Megan McMurray and other property owners of the Seattle Snohomish Mill, has requested that letter of support from the City Council. The request by the property owner specifically asks for Council support of proposed changes to development regulations that currently constrain the site to only lumber mill as a non-conforming use, recreational or agricultural uses. The concern is that none of these current allowed uses remain economic for the property owner, and without a further change in county development code, this property may lay vacant for many years. Existing Snohomish County development regulations for the underlying light industrial zone permit a wide range of uses, and these are reflected in the county's urban zoning matrix that begins on page 50 and runs through page 59, or actually page 60 of your packet. The column pretty far to the right, indicated as LI, is the one that you should be looking at to cross-check the various uses if they are permitted as an outright use or as an administrative conditional use, which is an A designation, or as a conditional use, which is indicated by a C, or as a special use, which is an S. The draft letter also points out that because no specific code change has yet been reviewed by the city, that we look forward to the opportunity to provide specific comments on any proposed legislation to revise the existing development regulations for the site in the future. And we would, of course, bring that information back to the City Council for further review when it is available to staff. The concern that staff has identified for the current limitations on land uses are that the deterioration of the remaining structures would continue over time, that a blighted property remaining at a key city entryway and in view of the city's historic business district could affect retail operations in the historic business district, and that an attractive nuisance may develop over time at the property that could potentially attract homeless population, become a target for vandalism or other crime, including heroin users who are always looking for out-of-the-way places for drug use. That essentially summarizes the work the staff has done to prepare this letter. We're available to answer any questions if you would like us to do so.
Does Council have questions of staff? I do have a question, Mr. Baumann. You bring up the potential for blight there and potential for drug use. And Chief Flood, would you do you have any comments on that? I know that heroin is a problem in our community, as in every community. I know that you've made some progress with arrests here, but I'd like your comments relative to that particular site.
Yes, certainly. So, Council may remember that we've had issues along First Street with transients that have been living under the sidewalk, which is near the river. We've had reports of vagrants already at our visitor center. They sleep on the bench at night. We've had hand-to-hand drug sales at the visitor center. And both of these locations are in our jurisdiction just over the Avenue D bridge. The mill site is outside the city limits. It is under the jurisdiction of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office. The precinct that has responsibility for that area is Mill Creek. It's not out here in East County. So a deputy responding to an incident out there, that's going to be a low priority, and the chances of him getting there in a timely fashion are more than likely going to be very slim. What that will mean is that activity that we once saw in our community will now probably take place at the mill site, which is not going to be patrolled by us. It's not going to be patrolled actively by the Sheriff's Office because of the out-of-the-way location. We also know that the fourplex located just over the bridge on the right-hand side near the auto body repair place, 9510 Airport Way, is a location that in the past has housed multiple crooks, known felons, and drug dealers. There is a well-worn path from the fourplex underneath Avenue D right into the mill that is not visible to the public. So there's already an established route to get to and from the mill that can be used by individuals that are looking to secrete themselves from our view. That, unchecked and allowed to fester, will one day become something that we financially will probably have to invest a considerable amount to correct. And I would rather be proactive and make this unattractive for people who want to set up and do illegal activities there, rather than trying to address this down the road when it can become more expensive.
Okay, good. Thank you for those comments. Yes, Councilor Shalati.
Does that also put pressure on the Snohomish Police Department? Because I suppose if a call does come in that area, you're going to be called if you have available officers at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, the way that would work, an in-progress emergency type call, certainly we're going to go and assist. Call of a vagrant walking around the property, that's not any kind of emergent, and more than likely we may assist, but if we have other things happening in the city, we're paid to be here in the city, and so we're going to address that first rather than go across the bridge and go to the mill.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Councilman Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one that's a little tangential. My grandfather was a mill foreman, and I was chatting with my dad about this. I was just curious, does the mill site have a water right? Did it use a lot of water?
I don't know if it has a water right. It has a water connection from the city.
To the city?
Yes.
All right. A lot of big mills have water rights.
Water meter which has currently been disconnected.
Okay. A lot of big mills have water rights to the rivers that are next to them.
I'm not aware of that. That'd be a question for the property owner.
Yeah. Just curious. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, then I'll open it up to citizen comments, and I see Mr. Davis, you'd like to talk to us about this as well.
Yeah. Good evening. Morgan Davis, 206I. I have a couple questions, but first I'll read from the permitted uses on your chart. On pages 50. First of all, I'm opposed to this letter. You didn't run it through your planning commission. Mr. Hamilton a minute ago said that why didn't I speak to the planning commission about zoning changes on the Bickford Park business park parcel. Well, here you don't even have the planning commission weighing in on this, and this is very important. The whole southern UGA is subject to squatters and homeless people. So, and it's a property owner that's responsible for vandalism, and the taxpayer shouldn't be involved. But I'm opposed to this letter. And meanwhile, the most important thing is the permitted uses you want to have the county impose. I'll read them starting out alphabetically. Adult entertainment business permitted. Auto wrecking yard permitted. Commercial vehicle storage facility permitted. And then we go to fuel and coal yard permitted. And then we go to hazardous waste storage and treatment facilities. Hazardous waste storage and treatment facilities on-site and off-site. Junkyard. Kennel, can you imagine 1,000 dogs barking for the people that live along 1st Street and 2nd Street? And then we got marijuana processing. And then we got marijuana production. And then we got a massage parlor. And then we got petroleum products and gas storage. And then we got a racetrack. And we're not done yet. Hang on, I hope I got a minute left. We got composting. Can you imagine Cedar Grove putting a satellite station there like Marysville has, where they have wood chips and wood waste recycling? Wouldn't that be nice along 1st Street across the river? So you are really jumping the gun. You should run this through your planning commission. And I know just like you had that resolution to the Payne Field on the airport, commercial jet passenger at Payne Field through the mayor's prime donor, Hank Robinette, you fell over backwards to that resolution. You undercut the mayor of Mukilteo, Jennifer Gregerson. I'm sure Mr. Pincus remembers that. And you should stay out of this. This is the county decision. The Snohomish taxpayers haven't had a chance to weigh in on this. You didn't even run it through the planning commission. So you need to reject this draft letter right tonight. And I got a question.
Now you're out of time.
Is the Waltz family still the owner? They're the ones that stole $600,000 worth of water illegally tapping into a fire hydrant.
Mr. Davis.
Mr. Burke thinks they're getting the water from the river.
Mr. Davis.
No, they stole it from the taxpayers.
Mr. Davis, please sit down. All right. Other citizen comments? Come forward, please. Mr. Sullivan. Name and address, please, Mr. Sullivan.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Bauman, and citizens. My name is Sean O'Sullivan, and I represent the family that owns the mill down there. And what we're asking is simply the county, as you know, it is county property. As you know, they have been good stewards and neighbors for a very long period of time. I want to make this, before I get into the meat and potatoes of this issue, I want to make clear, and I want you to keep in mind that this family, for over 7 decades, provided family wage jobs and supported this community with family wage jobs for 70 years. I think that's incredible. And also, as a former timber, pulp, and paper lobbyist in Olympia for 8 years, I've worked on these issues, and we tried to save hundreds of sawmills here in the state of Washington that went down like a domino effect because of free trade deals from private landowners selling their trees to foreign countries, and for the shrinking of logging here in the area. The federal lands are almost all but gone, and I know the land management for the state of Washington, these mill owners have to bid on timber. And if you've ever been to a timber sale at the DNR office, it's kind of brutal because they're all trying to buy timber at a good rate so they can keep their mills going. Now this family heroically tried to keep this mill going. I know because I as a labor lobbyist, I talked to the union that represented that mill, and they were nothing but complimentary of the hard work, and they tried to do everything they could to keep that going. So that said, the issue really is the probability of getting another sawmill in there is not impossible, but it's improbable due to the state of the timber, pulp, and paper industry here in the state of Washington. And it's sad, it's tragic. I know I worked for Kimberly-Clark for 38 years, and that was 2,000 jobs lost there. Now we're talking about family wage jobs. And it's the family wage jobs and that security that you want back on that site. So what we're asking for isn't to change the FEMA floodplain density rules. What we're asking for is to just simply use the outline in the county industrial use matrix and they can be found online. And if you go online, I have a copy of all of them here. There's quite 40 pages of them.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, can you wrap it up, Mr. Sullivan?
Pardon me?
Can you wrap it up, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
So we're just looking to add any use that is not currently already permitted in the use matrix. We are just asking to allow to utilize the uses that are already designated for the property.
Okay.
As for as the council staff indicated in the support letter, we do not want to see the property remain vacant because it will not provide any economic benefit to the community.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan.
That's about it. All right, so
Thank you. We hear you. So
thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this particular issue of a letter of support? Mr. Kartak.
John Kartak, 714 4th Street. I'm a little bit confused by one of the last comments here. You'd like the land to be used as it's already designated. What is it that you're asking that's not already designated? And that's probably what's being of concern here. I appreciate Morgan Davis's comment that it hasn't been run through our planning commission. It also hasn't been run past the people of Snohomish. And this is one of the main entrances into our town, and it's just on the other side of the river. What it ends up looking like is going to greatly affect our city. And it seems to me this is the sort of thing that shouldn't be a letter written by our mayor in the name of our town, because the town has not been asked about this. Is it true we can get adult entertainment centers, strip joints, marijuana-related industries, massage parlors, and we all know what that's all about? We have a homeless problem in town, and I want to know why we aren't taking care of the homeless that's already in camp. They're camping out underneath our bridges, and as far as I understand, that's not legal, and I'd like to know why that's not being taken care of. So I think we should solve our own problems before we start thinking we can solve problems on the other side of the river, because homeless people probably like to hang out in light industrial places just as much as the place that's there right now. If we've got buildings that are going to be falling apart and homeless that are going to be there causing problems, it seems to me that the owners of the property should be responsible for their property. And I appreciate that they've served our town. They've done it while making a profit, and that's a good thing. But now I think what they're asking to do is to make more profit, because what they're asking to do is to make their land, which by the nature of it being inexpensive, it's allowed them to make a profit. And now what they're asking to do is to make it so that their land is more profitable to sell. And the land itself has an inherent value to it regardless of the price tag that's put on it. If it becomes more costly to buy, then it makes it less likely that maybe it could be used for something that would be good for our city. And this is, again, I don't have any answers on this, but I think that this is something that the people of Snohomish should be, there should be a conversation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kartak. Anybody else like to speak on this issue? Okay, back to council for deliberation, action. Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Guzak. Mr. Kartak asked a really good question as to why we're not running it by the Planning Commission first, and try to give some enlightenment to that. A number of years ago, some people remember that there was a developer who had acquired some rights to the land north of the city, in fact, outside of our city limits and our UGA. And they had wanted to annex into the city. And of course, that first meant coming into the UGA, and there were a lot of technical things that had to happen in terms of involving the county and their planning department. But because of the desire to come inside the city and develop a very large tract of land, the Planning Commission did work on that because this was land that was looking to be annexed into the city, and through a long public process, there was a very explored plan. Of course, the recession just kind of wiped that and went away. In this specific case, nobody is looking to annex into the city. And anything that's in our UGA, we basically have no power over. And in the past, the county has allowed development in our UGA that had standards lower than what we have within our city. And then at some point in the future, after something is developed under those lower standards, it becomes annexed into the city and winds up creating some headaches for us. In this particular case, the owner of the property would like to be able to do something with that property, and they are asking for the city support. So we have an opportunity to have some input to the county to try to control what might happen there. And I realize that there is an incredibly long list of potential things that could be developed on that property, some of them less desirable perhaps to our citizens than others. But that's something, unfortunately, that's just totally out of the city's control. At this point, there'd probably be no opportunity for that area to be annexed into the city. The requirements that we as a city would place on somebody wanting to be annexed in certainly wouldn't include some of those less desirable zoning developments should they happen there. We have no idea what the property owner will actually do with it somewhere down the road. At this point, we're just trying to encourage the county to do something that can have a greater economic impact for our city. And I think that's why it's not going before the Planning Commission. Let me say, I made some notes here. Let me see if I covered everything. Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Hamilton. Does anybody else like to speak? Councilmember Shalati.
I'm not opposed to having this run by the Planning Commission. I mean, our boards and commission are valuable to us as a council, and we use their input often in making our decisions. I think that Councilmember Hamilton spoke eloquently to the process and what we're doing here. We're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because we don't need to give this kind of support, and if there's no support there and the county doesn't change it, then we run into the problem of having that land vacant and nothing happening to it. And we have heard from Chief Flood that the potentials of problems if that's the case. In any type of zoning, the city doesn't have, as Councilmember Hamilton said, we could have, if it were our zoning, we could have more restrictive zoning than what the county has. But even within our zone, we don't control businesses that come into town as long as they meet the zoning codes. We don't really have a say as to what comes in. So it's I don't know, I got a little bit of an impression from some of the comments that we as a city can decide what happens specifically to that property. That's not exactly true. But I am fine with having this run by the city council if that's something that the council would like to do.
By the planning
by the Planning Commission.
Back to council. So I am in support. This is just simply a letter of support to the county council and the county planning department to try to find more economic viability for that particular site, which is so exceedingly restricted now and is an eyesore at the gateway of our city. And I think this is a letter of support for probably a long process that's going to go through the county and probably a long process for the owners of that property as well. So I'm certainly in support of this, but I'd be glad to hear from other members of the council, and if anybody wants to make a motion, we'll do that. Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm fine with the letter of support. I think we can do that fairly soon. It is a long process, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with running it by the Planning Commission and getting some advice on maybe exactly how we word that letter.
I have a question. What do you think the Planning Commission would bring to that? I just have.
Well, I'm just wondering if we could encourage, if there's something that's a real problem, like, there's a lot of money in composting. It really smells, and so I don't like the idea of that wafting across the river, that kind of a thing. So that's my only thought, is just that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. I'm just curious. Dialogue with you is that this is.
It's not our land. I understand.
Right, it's not our land. Yeah. Councilor Randall, you have something to say?
Well, I guess I'm in support of this letter. I'm just wondering if there's some more concrete proposals that come up during the hearing process at the county, that maybe we can engage our Planning Commission at that point. Then we have something a little more concrete for them to work on. Right now, it's would be difficult, I think, for them to really do this.
Right. Councilor Rorschach, Councilor Wild, do you have anything to say about this? No? Councilor Shalati. Councilor Rorschach.
No, I was just going to say that I do support the letter. So.
You want to make a motion to that effect?
Sure. I recommend that the City Council review the draft letter of support for changes to Snohomish County development regulations and authorize the mayor to sign the letter on behalf of the City Council.
All right, so motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Randall. So further, yes, Councilor Shalati.
I just think that it will be difficult, though, if there is a use that comes in that we're opposing to, and we have this letter out there saying that we're supporting this, and then that use comes, and then we engage at that point to oppose it, and so that's going to be somewhat awkward. But again, the alternative is that what the county, that property now is not going to be used, as was stated by Mr. Sullivan, as a mill. I mean, the chances of that are so very, very slim. And the county's regulations over that now are so restrictive that there is really no use for that property. So it will remain vacant. So, this is one of those, you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't. So, I'm willing to support this letter for now, but I think we need to be very diligent as this goes forward.
Absolutely. All right, are we ready to vote on this? Okay, so all those in favor of supporting the letter and authorizing my signature, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. So the motion carries, and we will, of course, monitor this closely. We have great investment in what happens here, not financially and not land-wise, but certainly relative to what we desire to see here. And I would really love to see, I have all kinds of ideas of things that could be really wonderful there. Okay, so let's continue on. We've got discussion items. We've got the open